Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're heading to a region known for its sunshine and beaches, but we're going beyond that to uncover the secrets of sustainable living in Mediterranean climates.
It really is more than just, idyllic vacation spots. There's a whole fascinating world of sustainable practices and adaptations unique to these regions.
Yeah, and we're going to unpack all of that today, from unique climate patterns and clever building techniques to water-saving strategies, agriculture that can handle the heat, and powering it all up sustainably.
It's all connected, you can't really separate one aspect from another.
Absolutely. So let's dive into the first piece of this puzzle, the Mediterranean climate itself.
Okay, sounds good.
I think most people are familiar with the basics.
Yeah.
Those hot, dry summers and mild, wet winters.
Right, the classic Mediterranean climate.
But what are some of the nuances we might not be aware of, some of those things that go beyond just packing the right clothes for vacation?
Well, those climate patterns have a huge impact on just about every aspect of daily life there.
For example?
Think about water for a second. You have scarcity in the summer, so you need clever ways to collect and conserve it. But then you've got those winter rains, which can cause sudden floods if you're not prepared. And soil erosion, too.
Oh, that reminds me. One of the sources mentioned that the soil in these regions is often sandy and doesn't hold water well.
Exactly.
It's like a double whammy: limited rainfall and then soil that doesn't retain water well.
Yeah, that one detail about the soil, it affects everything. From the types of crops you can grow to how you design irrigation systems, even how you build homes to make the most of every drop.
Wow, so much to think about. It's amazing how one seemingly small thing can have such a ripple effect. It makes me think about those amazing buildings we see in Mediterranean regions.
Oh, yeah, like those whitewashed houses with the terracotta roofs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a reason those designs have stood the test of time, right? And one thing that really caught my eye was the idea of passive cooling. Staying cool without cranking up the AC all summer. Sign me up.
Passive cooling is all about working with the environment, not fighting against it.
So how does that work in practice?
Well, think thick walls, like stone or adobe. They absorb heat during the day and release it slowly at night, keeping things comfortable naturally. Then you add things like shaded courtyards and strategically placed windows to create natural airflow.
It's like the building itself is designed to breathe.
Exactly.
The sources I read even mentioned green roofs, which I always thought were just for aesthetics.
They're beautiful, yeah, but they actually act as natural insulation too, reducing the need for AC even further.
So it's beautiful A&D functional. I love that.
And you can't forget fire resistance.
Oh, right. In a climate prone to wildfires, that's essential.
Using fire-resistant materials and incorporating things like defensible space around the home can make a huge difference.
It's all about smart design, resilient materials, and creating homes that can withstand those Mediterranean climate challenges.
Absolutely.
And speaking of challenges, let's shift gears to water management. The sources I read really emphasized rainwater harvesting.
Yeah, it's a must-have in these regions.
It seems obvious when you think about those dry summers, right?
Those winter rains are precious, And rainwater harvesting systems let you capture and store that water to use during the dry months. It's like having a water bank for a sunny day.
I love that analogy. And get this, the sources even mentioned that gray water, the water from sinks and showers, can be recycled to water plants.
It's amazing how many ways there are to stretch those water resources, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really highlights how precious every drop is in these climates. And speaking of adapting to limited water, one thing that was new to me was xeriscaping.
Ah, yes. Xeriscaping.
It's all about using drought-tolerant plants in landscaping, right?
Exactly. So instead of trying to maintain a lush green lawn that needs constant watering, you choose plants that are already adapted to those dry conditions.
It makes a lot of sense. Work with nature, not against it.
That's the key to sustainable living in any climate, really. But it's especially important in Mediterranean regions where water is such a precious resource.
Well said. Okay, so we've talked about the climate, building smart, and managing water. But we can't forget about food.
Ah, yes. Agriculture in a Mediterranean climate, that's a whole other fascinating topic.
Exactly. How do you grow enough food in a region where water is scarce? I'm guessing you can't exactly be growing rice paddies out there.
You got it. Choosing the right crops is essential. Drought-resistant varieties are key.
So we're talking about things like
Olives, grapes, figs, almonds, those classic Mediterranean staples that have evolved to thrive in these conditions.
makes sense. But it's more than just choosing the right crops, isn't it? I came across this term agroforestry while I was
Yeah.
doing research for this. What's that all about?
Now agroforestry is where things get really interesting. It's about combining trees and crops in a way that benefits both.
Could you give an example?
Sure. Imagine olive trees planted alongside grapevines. The trees provide shade, which reduces evaporation and creates a more resilient system overall.
Wow, I never thought of that.
It's kind of like creating these little micro ecosystems where the plants can support each other.
It's amazing how much we can learn from nature when we pay attention.
Absolutely.
So we've got this innovative approach to agriculture, but earlier we talked about how the soil itself can be challenging in Mediterranean regions.
Yeah.
What are some ways that farmers are adapting to that? I know the sources mentioned terracing, but I'm not really sure what that means.
Terracing is basically sculpting the landscape to work with you.
In what way?
You create these flat steps on hillsides, which help to prevent soil erosion. Those heavy winter rains can really wash away topsoil.
Right, and topsoil is essential for growing food.
Exactly. So terracing helps to hold the soil in place, making the most of that limited arable land.
It's fascinating how much ingenuity goes into sustainable living in these regions.
It's all about adapting to the terrain, not trying to fight against it.
And it seems like that's a recurring theme we see again and again when it comes to sustainable living in these regions.
You hit the nail on the head. Recognizing the limitations and opportunities presented by the environment, then finding creative ways to work within those boundaries.
So we've covered how people are building, managing water, and approaching agriculture in these unique climates. But there's one crucial piece of the puzzle left: how to power it all up sustainably.
Ah, yes. The energy piece of the puzzle. We can't forget that.
And I have a feeling that given all that sunshine, solar energy is going to be a major player here.
You're on the right track. But there's a lot more to the story than just solar panels. We'll dive into all of that when we come back.
All right, we're back and ready to tackle the energy challenge in Mediterranean climates. Last time we were talking about all that glorious sunshine, and I think it's pretty clear where we're headed.
Solar power, right.
You got it. I can already picture rows of solar panels soaking up all that energy.
You're not wrong. Solar is a natural fit for these regions. All that sunlight makes it incredibly reliable and, importantly, cost-effective too. We're talking rooftop solar panels, larger scale solar farms, even solar water heaters are becoming increasingly common.
Oh yeah, I've even seen those solar ovens.
Right. It's not just about generating electricity, it's also about directly using solar energy for daily needs.
Love that. Makes total sense. So it sounds like a pretty straightforward solution. What's the catch?
Well, nothing is ever that simple, right? One thing that came up in the research is the challenge of integrating all this solar power into the existing energy grid.
Oh, right. I remember reading about that. It's not like you can just plug in a bunch of solar panels and call it a day.
Exactly. When you have a ton of solar energy coming online during peak sunshine hours, it can create imbalances in the grid.
It's a balancing act, right? Matching supply and demand.
Precisely. And that's where energy storage solutions come in.
So like giant batteries that can store that excess solar energy during the day and then release it when the sun goes down.
Exactly. Think of them as giant energy banks. Batteries are a major player, but there are other cool technologies being explored too, like pump hydro, where you use excess energy to pump water uphill.
And then release it downhill later to generate electricity. I think I've heard of that.
You got it. So we've got solar energy covered, but what about those times when the sun isn't shining? We can't rely on solar alone right now.
Right. What happens when the sun goes down or if there's a cloudy day?
Well, remember how we talked about those consistent breezes along the Mediterranean coast?
Yeah, those were hard to ignore.
Well, that makes wind power another strong contender in the mix. Offshore wind farms, especially, have a ton of potential.
It makes sense. Those coastal areas are often densely populated, so you've got a built-in demand for electricity right there.
Exactly. It's all about matching the energy source to the location and the needs of the community. But we've got to think even broader than just solar and wind. The sources I was looking at also highlighted the potential of biomass energy in these regions.
Biomass. Wait, isn't that just burning wood? That doesn't sound very renewable.
That's a common misconception. When done sustainably, biomass can actually be a very renewable source.
Oh. So what are we talking about here?
It's about using agricultural waste, sustainably harvested wood, or even dedicated energy crops that are grown specifically for this purpose.
Oh, I see. So instead of letting those materials decompose and release carbon into the atmosphere, we're capturing that energy and putting it to use.
Exactly. It's a neat way to close the loop. And for a lot of rural communities where access to other renewable sources might be limited, biomass can be a great local solution.
I like that. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Absolutely. Different communities will have different needs and resources. It's about finding the right solution for each unique situation.
I can definitely get behind that. Okay, so we've got solar, wind, and biomass in the mix. What else is there to consider when it comes to energy in these regions?
Well, there's one more piece of the puzzle we can't ignore, especially in fire-prone areas: resilience.
Oh, right. With the increasing threat of wildfires, our energy infrastructure needs to be able to withstand those events.
Absolutely. Alongside the shift towards renewables, there's a growing focus on designing fire-resistant energy systems.
What would that look like?
Things like underground power lines, using fire-resistant materials for solar panels and wind turbines, and careful vegetation management around any energy facility.
That makes a lot of sense. We're really talking about building in resilience from the ground up.
You got it. It's not just about choosing renewable energy sources. It's also about designing those systems to be robust and adaptable to whatever challenges might come their way.
That's a great reminder that sustainability is about the big picture. It's about long-term thinking and making sure our systems can function reliably, even in the face of extreme conditions.
So it sounds like Mediterranean communities are taking a multifaceted approach to energy, combining solar, wind, biomass, and really prioritizing grid integration and resilience.
Absolutely. It's a dynamic field, and the solutions are always evolving as new technologies emerge. It's inspiring to see so much innovation happening, but it's not just about technology, right?
You're right, it's not. It's also about changing our mindset and our behaviors.
Being more mindful of how much energy we use.
Yeah. Making choices that reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and supporting policies that promote renewable energy development.
We all have a role to play, right?
Exactly. It's a collective effort, and every little bit helps.
Well, we've explored how people in Mediterranean regions are building, managing water, and powering their lives sustainably. But there's one more crucial piece of the puzzle we can't leave out. Food.
Food security. That's a big one.
It is.
Yeah.
How do you feed a population in a water-scarce climate? I know we touched on choosing the right crops earlier, but there's got to be more to the story.
Oh, there's a lot more to explore. We've only just scratched the surface.
So how do you tackle this challenge of feeding a population in a water-scarce climate? We talked about choosing the right crops like olives and grapes, but what are some other strategies for ensuring food security in these regions?
Well, one interesting approach is called dryland farming.
Dryland farming?
Yeah. It's all about using specific techniques adapted to those arid and semi-arid regions.
What kind of techniques?
Think about things like mulching, which helps reduce evaporation, or planting crops in rows so they can capture rainwater more effectively, and even special ways of tilling the soil to minimize disturbance.
So it's a whole system, really.
It is. It's not just about the crops themselves. It's about managing the entire farming system to make the most of every drop of water.
That makes sense. It's all about working with those natural limitations, not trying to force things. Are there any other trends happening in Mediterranean agriculture?
Yeah, there's a growing movement towards more localized and diversified food systems.
So moving away from those big monoculture farms that ship food all over the place.
Exactly. It's about smaller farms, growing a wider variety of crops, and doing it closer to where people actually live.
So more farmers markets.
Yep. More community gardens, too. And a real renewed focus on those traditional Mediterranean crops that are already well adapted to the climate.
It's about bringing it back to the roots, in a way.
It is. And it's not just good for the environment, it's good for people, too.
How so?
Well, it builds resilience into the food system, reduces reliance on global supply chains, and connects people more directly to the sources of their food.
That's such a beautiful way to think about
It
it.
really is.
So we've got the farming practices, but what about the food we eat? Does that play a role in all of this?
Absolutely. Shifting our diets towards more sustainable choices is a huge part of the puzzle.
So less meat.
Less meat is definitely a good starting point. But it's also about incorporating more plant-based proteins, embracing those classic Mediterranean staples, olives, fruits, veggies, whole grains, the good stuff.
The delicious stuff. It really highlights how food choices have a direct impact on the environment.
They really do. By embracing a more plant-forward, locally sourced diet, we can reduce our ecological footprint.
And support more sustainable agricultural practices in the process.
Exactly.
It's amazing to see how everything we've talked about today is connected,
I know.
from climate patterns and how buildings are designed to the energy sources we choose, how we manage water, and even the food we put on our plates. It's all part of the same story.
It really is. It's a reminder that sustainability isn't just about one thing. It's about all of these interconnected systems working together in harmony.
And that's what's so fascinating about these Mediterranean regions. They're really showing us what's possible when we start thinking holistically and working with nature.
They really are pioneers in a lot of ways, finding innovative solutions, adapting to the challenges of a changing climate. It's pretty inspiring to see.
It is. And it gives me hope that no matter where we live, we can all learn from these examples and apply these principles in our own lives.
I agree. We can all make a difference.
Every little bit helps, right?
Absolutely.
Well, this has been an incredible journey. From capturing rainwater and harnessing sunshine to growing food in a water-scarce climate and building homes that work with nature, not against it. We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
It's clear that there's a lot we can learn from these innovative approaches and that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. It's all about adapting to the unique challenges and opportunities of each place.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
But the key takeaway here is that we can all be part of the solution.
Absolutely.
So to all of our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep striving to live a little more sustainably each and every day.
Well said.
Because every small step we take, every conscious choice we make, it all adds up. It brings us closer to a brighter future for everyone.
Until next time.